Now that we have some of our basic DAX measures completed, let's go ahead and start building some of our first data visuals. And we're not going to worry too much about formatting the data visuals perfectly. We're, kind of doing rough sketches at this point with our data visuals. As far as the actual color choices and making sure that all of the fonts are perfect and readability and giving all of our visuals really good and descriptive titles, we'll worry about all of that when we start getting to our design and layout phase a little bit later in the lesson. That's when we're going to start sort of tying all of our cosmetic choices and our text together to create a very cohesive sort of theme and flow to our infographic. But for now, we're just going to start sort of assembling the data visuals that we think might be interesting for our summary section. So I'm going to start a new section here, and let's just call this Summary Visuals. And the reason that I keep creating new pages and then hiding them is that we're just going to put all of our visualization sketches on these different pages. And then when it comes time to assemble our infographic, we're just going to copy and paste everything that we've already built and sort of overlay it into position on our infographic. And all of that's going to make perfect sense, I think, when we get to the actual layout design. But for now, we're just building data visuals. Let's go back to our Summary Visuals page. And the first visual that I'm going to put together is going to be super, super simple. We're just going to grab our product details and we're going to drop this onto the page here, and we're going to grab our total sales measure, and I'm going to drop this in here, and you can see there's a table here. And what I want to do is I'm just going to isolate the top 10 best sellers by revenue. So let's go ahead and head up here to product detail. And since I just demonstrated this a moment ago, what I'm going to use is the top N filter type on this visual. I'm going to apply this top N filter to product detail. As I just said a moment ago, I want this visual to return the top 10 products, and I want that top 10 to be determined by total sales, which I'm already using in the visual over here. So I'm just going to drop total sales into the by value part of my filter. I'm going to apply it. There are my top 10 visuals. And of course, tables aren't, inherently very interesting to look at. So let's go ahead and turn this into a bar chart. There's all of the same information. Now I'm just going to go and apply very quickly some super, super basic formatting, mainly just because I cannot stand the Power BI default colors. To me, they're just a little bit too bright. And, especially on a white background, they kind of hurt my eyes. Maybe it's just me. But let's go ahead and just pick gray for now. We don't lose anything in this visual. We don't lose any information switching from blue to gray. And I'm going to apply conditional formatting color to this later on in the lesson. So for now, I'm just, again, putting together a very, very basic visual. I'm going to apply some just super simple formatting to it right now. First, I'm going to focus on my y-axis, which contains, of course, all of my descriptions of the products. And of course, some of these, like the Davy Jones sustainable whatever, are very, very long descriptions, and they get cut off really, really quickly. So let's go to our y-axis settings, and let's grab this maximum width dial here that controls how much space we have for each text value in our y-axis. And let's just drag this out. Let's try 35. Okay, it looks like most of my values are now appearing without being cut off, and the visual is still quite readable. I'm going to make it just a little bit larger and see if I can get that dark chocolate on there. Okay, that's looking good. My Davy Jones is still being cut off, but I don't think there's any amount of spacing in the world that's probably going to allow me to put all of this long, long title. So now, what we're going to do is I'm just going to turn off my label here on the y-axis. We'll make sure when we give this a title that people are clear what they're looking at. So I'm just going to turn off my y-axis label. It's not really telling me or my users anything that they don't already know. We already know that we're looking at dollars here. Even my total sales title is a little bit redundant. And I'm even going to turn off my x-axis. And I'm just going to, instead of having an x-axis, I'm just going to label the actual bars themselves. And I don't mind the Segway UI font that's sort of Power BI's default, but anybody who's watched a lot of my videos knows that I prefer DIN. I just find it to be a little bit bolder, a little bit easier to read. And especially if you're building something that people need to read or read from across a room, or if you're printing something, you want text that's going to be, really, really easy for them to make out. So this is looking pretty good to me. The only other finishing touch that I'm going to go ahead and make here, just to save myself some time later, is let's go ahead and give this a good title. And so what we're showing here are the top 10 best-selling products by total sales, revenue, whatever you want to call it. And I like to italicize my titles. That's totally just an aesthetic thing. It doesn't really add anything. If you decide you don't like it italicized, no one's going to call you out on it. There's one visual done. For my next visual, I'm just going to copy and paste this because I'm going to be building another bar chart here. But instead of using product detail, I'm going to use something else from my product table. And I'm going to use product category here. And you can see right now I only have 3 values. That's because I still have this top 10 filter on here. I'm just going to get rid of this by removing that filter. And there's all of my values here. Now, what I'm going to do here that we haven't done yet is I'm going to create my own custom title here. I'm going to go ahead and open up my nested measures here, and I'm going to create a brand new label here that utilizes my my total sales measure here. And I'm actually going to do this in 2 parts. So for the first part here, I'm just going to call this bar chart label. And if you want to call it something even more descriptive like product category, since that's what we're using in this bar chart, that's totally fine. And I'm going to go ahead and use format as my DAX function. And the reason for that is the way that I'm going to be designing this. It's hard to talk and type at the same time, 2 different things. What I'm actually going to be doing is creating a 2-step label here for each of these bars that shows not only the dollars, but also shows the percentage of overall sales. And so in creating this custom bar chart label, I'm actually going to be converting what Power BI is recognizing as numeric values into strings. So let's go ahead and I'll keep this simple at first. Let's go ahead and just say, okay, we want to format the values in our total sales measure. And we want to make sure that they're always formatted as dollars. I'll just leave that as is for now. That should work. One thing that I'm going to do real quickly before I go to the next step is I'm just going to right click on column 1 here for my nested measures table. I'm going to hide it so that it converts this table into a measures table. And now let's head back to our chart here. I'm going to open up my data labels. And this is a fairly new feature in Power BI that we're about to cover. I'm going to open up my options for my values under my data labels. And I'm going to go to custom label and turn this feature on. And you can see that now my data labels have disappeared. And that is because Power BI is now waiting for me to add something to this add data field here. And in this case, I'm just going to add my measure. And you can see that all of my values immediately appear here. And by default, they're showing me the full value, 269,952, 196,406. What I want to do is I actually want to conserve a little bit of space in this visual. I'm going to make this just a little bit smaller to demonstrate it. What I want to do is I want to lop off these last 3 values here and just round this up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say within this bar chart label, I actually want to show this value in thousands. So I'm going to divide by 1,000 here. And yes, you can also use the divide function here, but I'm not going to do it this time. And we're going to divide our total sales by 1,000. And now you can see I've got $270, $196, $82. All of this is technically wrong because we know that these values represent thousands. It's like this is 270,000, 196,000. So all I'm going to do is go over here in my formatting options, and I'm going to tell Power BI, add a K to the end of these values so that people understand that we're looking at thousands of dollars here. Next, I'm going to have to create one more measure here, and this is going to be my percent of sales measure. And what this value is going to do is for every chart here, or every bar here, this is going to show what percentage out of all of the sales here 270,000 makes up versus 196. I'm going to just leave that measure there for now and just demonstrate again what I'm talking about. Let's go ahead and grab our total sales measure that we've already made and let's add it to our tooltips. And you can see now I've got total sales twice in my tooltip every time I hover over these bars. I'm going to go ahead and click on this little down caret here, and I'm going to tell Power BI, show me this as a grand total, as a percent of grand total. So what I want is I want to be able to isolate this 38.63%, this 28.11%, and so on and so forth. I want to be able to isolate this value, but show it as a part of my data label, which I cannot currently do the way that I've got this configured. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and head back over to my percent of sales measure here. And this is just simple division, right? I want to be able to divide $270,000 by my total sales, which, I'll go ahead and drag that over here and put it in a card just so we know what we're talking about here. I'm dividing $270,000 by this $699,000. That's where I'm getting this 38.63%. So let's head back up here, and like I said, this is simple division. We're going to be dividing total sales by, and what we're going to do here is for our denominator, we're going to calculate total sales for all selected products. Now I should be able to delete this percentage there in my tooltips, and let's see if our percent of sales is working correctly. I should see something like 0.39, 0.28, 0.12. This is working. It just needs to be formatted as a percentage. So let's go ahead and click on percent of sales. There's our percentage. Now you can see that everything is working just fine. I'm actually just going to remove the decimal places and just show this as a rounded percentage. This is totally fine for most of our values here. Now let's go ahead and head back to our bar chart label. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of string these text values together. And if you enter an ampersand, what you're going to be able to do is sort of enter new text values, and you'll be able to see once I commit this what this data label looks like. But right now all I'm doing is I'm taking the 270K and I'm attaching to this a space and an open parenthesis, and I'm going to put inside of my parentheses my percentage of sales, and I want that formatted as a percentage rather, with one decimal place. And then I'm going to close the parenthesis in my string. And now you can see on my data labels, my percentages are now appearing with a space, an open parenthesis, my formatted percentage, and the closing parenthesis. Oops, 1 second, I accidentally clicked on something. Okay, now real quickly, I want to go back and explain what is happening inside this percentage of sales measure, since I kind of glossed over it. I feel like everybody gets the total sales part, the numerator. We're just using the formula that we already wrote. But in order to get the percentages, people might be wondering what is going on with the denominator that I wrote, and why did I use all selected? So let's just go ahead and create a quick measure that we're going to throw away. And I'm just going to call this denominator because we're going to delete this measure as soon as I've demonstrated what it's doing. And this was calculate total sales for all selected values in our product dim table. And what's happening here is we're telling Power BI that we want to use our total sales, but we want to show total sales for all combined values in our product dim table. In other words, we don't want this value to change for any one value in our product dim. We want to see all total sales for everything in the product dim table. And here's the difference. if I just grab product category and drop total sales into the table, total sales is changing based on every single value over here, right? That's the normal functionality of Power BI. When I add all selected in here, I'm basically telling Power BI to ignore the individual values here and just show me the total. So notice when I drop denominator over here, you can see it's just 698,812 for anything. And since I said do this for anything in the product dim table, notice that it doesn't matter what I grab from the product dim table. If I add this value, it's always going to show $698,000. However, if I grab like store location, for example, you might be thinking that this is still going to show me 698,812, but it doesn't. It's filtering because the only thing that I told this calculation to ignore are values from my product dim table. It basically total sales is going to disregard and totally aggregate all of my sales for anything that comes from the product dim table, but not from, for example, the store dim table or my fact table or even my date table. So just wanted to make sure that you're at least kind of aware of what's happening in the denominator portion of our percent of sales formula. Now that I've got that, let's go ahead and create one more quick bar chart down here. And for this one, I'm going to kind of layer some of my product dim values together. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to add my product category and I'm going to add my total sales to my y-axis. That's looking pretty good. But what I want to do is I want to give people an additional layer of information here. What I want to do is I want to break out the individual product types within each category. So I'm going to go ahead and add product type and I'm going to nest this right here beneath product category. And there you can see that now it's expanding everything. If I drill back up, I'm just looking at product categories. If I hit this sort of forking arrow here, it's expanding product categories and product types at the same time. So that within my bakery product category, I can see my 3 product types and total sales. The same within branded, the same within coffee, coffee beans, flavors, loose tea, and tea. What this does is it just gives people a little bit more insight into what the best-selling product types are within product category. And it also, granted it's not as obvious as it could be right now, it also highlights that coffee and tea, even more so, are our best-selling product categories, which of course makes sense. Kraken Coffee is a coffee company. People go there for caffeine. So coffee, tea, those are the top-selling product types. I'm going to add some additional customization and aesthetics to this to really bring that point home once we start assembling our infographic. But for now, I'm just going to kind of leave this as is. The next visual that I'm going to build is going to focus on the total sales of our 3 stores, which you will remember are Miami, Orlando, and Tampa. So let's go ahead and just grab our store location. And what I want to do here is I'm going to try to show insights for both total sales. And you can see, honestly, it's not that interesting. There's a total of about $6,000 separating all 3 stores. You can see that Orlando and Miami are super close to each other. And while Tampa's the top, it's only top by, about $4,000. Pretty tight margin there. So let's look and see, if there's any difference across average order size. Maybe a little bit proportionally speaking, but again, this is a randomized data set. It's kind of hard to find, any real, what I would consider statistically significant insights, because I do think that most of this is just totally randomized. Even though the coffee, tea, being the best sellers, that makes total sense. But at least at this level across the 3 stores, there's not a whole lot that's extremely captivating. But anyway, let's go ahead and for this visual, I'm going to use a line and clustered column chart combined. And you can see that right now it's got total sales and average order size way down here because it's putting them both on the same axis. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to drag my average order size to my line part of my y-axis. And there is my new average order size. It's on a different axis now. And of course, it's a line chart. I don't like, personally, to keep the lines here, mainly for the reason that lines imply some sort of continuity between Tampa, Miami, and Orlando. And there really isn't any continuity. It doesn't matter what order we put these values in. These are just the unique average order sizes for each of these three locations. So, you know, we don't want somebody to interpret that there's like a downward trend and then an upward trend. There is no trend. These are just three unique values for these three different offices. So I'm going to go to my line here, and I'm just going to decrease the stroke width until that line completely disappears. Then I'm going to turn on my markers so that all I'm getting are just the dots that sort of represent the average order size. And next, let's go ahead and clean this up just a little bit more. I'm going to go ahead and just remove my values and titles from my y-axis. I'm trying to simplify this chart as much as possible. Let's go ahead and add our data labels. And I'm going to adjust these data labels separately for my two values here. So for my total sales, let's go ahead and position those at the base. I'm going to actually position my columns at the base, and let's orient those vertically. And let's go ahead and remove our backgrounds. I'm going to go back up here to my series settings, and I'm going to customize my total sales values. And let's just make those DIN font. And you should be focused over here on these three numbers that are vertical at the base. I'm going to make them as large as I reasonably can. Let's even try going to 14. Now, one thing that I'm noticing is I kept increasing the size of my fonts, and you might have noticed they're not increasing no matter how much I keep hitting this, this increase number. So what's going on here? Notice I've got this little warning sign. This visual is responsive. To return the data label font to its original size, enlarge the visual. I can't stand the responsive setting of visuals in Power BI. I don't know why this is on by default. Trips me up every single time. Has been for years. Microsoft, stop making responsive the default. Everyone hates it. Anyway, there is an easy way to turn that off. For any bar chart where you're running into that responsive setting headache, just go to General, drop down your advanced options, turn off responsive. Keep your eyes over here on these data labels as I hit this toggle and turn off responsive. Now they're gigantic. And that's because now they're reflecting the true font that I selected. Let's go ahead and head back to our data labels. I'm going to drop those back down to, I think 12 or 13 might have been what I settled on. And because they're too dark to see right now, let's just go ahead and brighten those up for now. I'm just going to make those a bright kind of blue. And you'll notice that this label is sort of overlapping with my average order size markers. So let's just go ahead and head up here. Let's go to our markers. Let's increase the size of those so that they're a little bit bigger. Let's go to our secondary y-axis, and let's see if changing this to 4.5 increases the position of my marker just enough there. Even going to try 4.4. Because we're building an infographic and this isn't going to be interactive, I can play with some things that I might not normally play with in these visuals, like manually configuring my secondary y-axis here. Let's see, maybe 4.9 will be ideal. There we go. I'm pretty happy with that. We can always come back and change the range of our secondary y-axis later. And for now, I'm just going to kind of leave that as is. Let's go back to our data labels and update this to average order size. And let's just go ahead and make these bigger. I'm going to make this white, which you'll notice that now my 481 doesn't really show up as much, but that's fine. We're going to go back up to our data labels. I'm going to say that I want my average order size numbers to be under the marker so that my 481 isn't up here against a white background. It's now here on top of my bar so that I can actually read it. And the last thing that I'm going to do here is for my spacing between these bars. I'm just going to make these bars a little bit tighter, just a little bit smaller there. No real reason. It's an aesthetic preference. Okay, we'll leave that the way that we have it for now. Again, we're going to continue to sort of toggle the presentation of all of these visuals once we get to the designing of the actual layout. For now, I'm just sort of staging the visuals that I want. We'll clean them up again later, but for now, let's go ahead and move on to the next section.